War, one of the oldest things we know as a way to solve our problems, and it leaves a great mess in its wake, such as during the Holocaust. You would see Jews in concentration camps left to either starve, be overworked to death, or be gassed or incinerated. Or even in the Armenian genocide, where men would be lining up in a death march towards the death like lambs to the slaughter from the Ottomans. Or these kids who are begging for mercy as they and their families are being killed and slain in front of them for not even the sins of their father during the Rwandan genocide. All of them died for reasons that they didn't have to. They didn't know why they have to exactly, but so that we may know, so that we may not be as puzzled as they were during their final moments. I'll reveal to what actually caused these horrific instances. Good morning. My name is Ron Mansour, and I'll show you what's the real cause behind all these atrocities, and that is synchronous behavior. And to answer that, we must first answer to what extent has synchronous behavior led to the execution of war crimes since 1915. And first we have to look at the psychology behind it. And this comes through how it starts with the higher up officials with group behavior. And this is seen through principles of group violence, group thinking, group approval. And it reinforced by a quote from one of the key medical advisors during the Nuremberg trials prosecuting the Nazi war criminals, Leo Alexander. He says that war crimes are crimes committed with group approval. And very much this visual shows a actual representation of how groupthink manifests, with multiple individuals having the same idea and they sharing it between each other, and it reinforces and solidifies their mindsets and ideals within their head. And that, if it was to be added to the war crimes that we dealt into later, this would solidify them, and then they can spread it as shown in the first stimulus source by Gelfand and colleagues, that synchrony can promote conformity aggression, where they can spread it through using conformist measures that we dive into later, and also to include instances of aggression in it that could lead to the instances that we've seen before of war crimes. Now, to look at how it affects the soldiers beneath them, it would be through harmful obedience, as shown with the military culture that Benjamin Matheson, a philosophy professor, reveals that this military culture, the chain of command in the military, that soldiers have to obey and have been trained to follow orders with no discussion, as detailed by Bettina Cheng of the Pacific Standard. All of these and come in this more specific instance by lawyer Kenneth Eisenman, who talks about the Nazis during the Nuremberg trials and their defense, would say that they had merely followed orders. And all of this comes to show that this military culture that pressures them to follow orders or face the severe consequences of martial law, then this would force them to follow the orders of these officers at the top, who have that solidified idea reinforced by groupthink and using conformist attitudes against them. Now, where this some exceptions to this rule include youth, like adolescents, and soldiers with exceptional characteristics in their situations. Now, as far as youth is concerned, with the last stimulus source by Doe and colleagues, it shows that youth are able to resist conformity. But the problem with this is that youth and soldiers have a really weak relationship, as the soldiers could represent the youth, while the youth's elders could represent the superiors, but that relationship is too weak for significance. And as shown in this quote, where a general during the American-Filipino War asked him and the soldiers, including this man, Major Waller, to kill and burn, and that the more they did it, the more it would please him, as given by Robert Patterson, owner of the National Arlington Cemetery historical website. Now, the problem with this is that even though he did resist, the problem is that he actually was a major. He held power in the ranks. He had some authority. And also, this order was blatantly immoral. And very much these situations are too rare, and these kinds of people are too few to actually hold significance to the bigger picture. Now, to look at how this goes from the socio-political perspective in the form of these ideologies that I was talking about, such as nationalism during the Armenian genocide, where the Ottomans trying to keep that nationalistic power and that ideals in their heads to keep a unified nation under the Ottoman Empire, and the Armenians posed a threat to that. So they use group violence and pushing conformist values on the soldiers of harmful obedience to force them to force people into situations of genocide. And then the same thing is repeated in the Holocaust, but with anti-Semitism instead, where the Jews are viewed as a scapegoat and are very much and the Nazi officials at the top, including Hitler and his officers, force their soldiers at the bottom to be putting these soldiers putting these Jews into camps and slaughtering them as they go and leave. And as far as the Rwandan genocide is concerned, it uses a different ideology of ethnic hatred, as the Hutus used to be subjugated by the Tutsis during imperialism. But once they gained power, they started enacting revenge with that groupthink mindset in their mind of holding a grudge against the Tutsis. They actually enacted through group violence and using conformist values on their soldiers on the lower ranks to actually do their dirty work. And then the Cambodian genocide was a Marxist revolution that very much killed anybody who would pose a threat to the Marxist ideals that we developed through groupthink at the top and brought down again to the soldiers at the bottom through conformist values and harmful obedience. And solutions to this include solving the psychological aspect with trying to enforce the values of nonconformity in children from early age. We already sort of do this as we tell kids to avoid peer pressure from illegal activities, but we need to intensify that. And also to break groupthink as a whole as possible, or affecting the socio-political side with dissolving these ideologies or weakening them. Now, they all have their limitations as enforcing this nonconformity, as shown by the last stimulus source by Doe and colleagues. It actually shows that youth are maybe conform more to their friends than their peers than their parents. So it's more difficult to enforce against their friends. And as they grow up, it may be more difficult to enforce. And at that point, it'll probably fail past childhood. And then breaking groupthink is very hard to do on a large scale. It's so integral, and also it may lead to more conflict if not done properly. And also will have to work slowly if to be done at all. Now, bringing the ideology may not be practical, and it can face heavy backlash like the previous previous solution that is the exact opposite of what we want, and it could at that point also rebound, which is even worse. And then weakening these ideologies may be possibly really slow or very weak, which could lead to a ineffective solution. But overall, mixing these together and using it in a tactful manner can actually act to at least limit the instances of these war crimes, at least in this modern time. These are my sources, and thank you.
I have 2 questions for you. All right, first question. What evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why did you decide not to use it?
Evidence I gathered and used included, as far as the socio-political side is concerned, I talked about, I actually got evidence about Stalin's Holodomor, where he starved many Ukrainians. The reason I didn't use that is because it would go into sort of the ideas of like Marxist communism as used part of the Soviet Union, and that could go in, but it would be a weaker example of the Cambodian genocide since it wasn't so blatantly brutal as the Cambodian genocide was, and plus his was also put into actually helping his country with industrialization, which may not work with my claim. And also the Pakistani genocide of the Bangladeshis. I got evidence of that, but that may not work, as it may not fit into these ideologies that I mentioned before, and may actually go to a tangent on a whole, or be too weak of evidence.
Okay, and if you had more time, what additional research would you do?
I would do more research into finding more exceptions to these rules, and possibly using more modern applications, such as instances during the recent Russia-Ukrainian war, as there have been reports that Russians have executed civilians by shooting them back of the head, which very much is the war crime that we can very much see in the modern day. That's I would probably dive into that if I have more time and integrate it in here. And also to talk about other synchronous behavioral concepts besides groupthink, group violence, all of that, to tie into this claim.